Hello, everybody. It's a very exciting day today in the world of open source video generation. As today we have the release of Wan 2.2, which is a successor model to the open source Wan 2.1. So today we're going to compare camera movements in Wan 2.1 versus Wan 2.2. So if you want to do really great storytelling, it's important to be able to have really fine-grained control over the camera movement in your scenes. And so we have a number of prompts here. We're going to talk about the camera movements and we're going to see how well WAN 2.1 and WAN 2.2 adhere to the various prompts. So here I have a workflow for WAN 2.1. This is the 1.3 billion parameter model, and as that's the one that produces 480p videos. For the sake of this experiment, I'm keeping the frame rate at 16 and the length at 65, and that gives us about a 4-second clip. I'm also sticking with 480p because even though I am running these on H100s, it can take quite a bit of time to do many iterations. So that's what we're sticking with for this video. We're starting with a prompt that specifies a pan left. A pan is when a camera is in a stationary position and rotates along its vertical axis to follow a character or to reveal additional details about a scene. So we're starting with a low angle shot of a jazz pianist in a bar. We're looking at the pianist, and then the camera will pan left and reveal a girl that is playing the trumpet, and we're doing that transition with a pan left. So let's see how WAN 2.1 does. Okay, so this is pretty good. The quality overall is not great. We are using the 1.3 billion parameter model, but it is doing exactly what I asked it. We have a pianist and it's panning left to the girl. So now let's see if we can get it to pan right. So you can see that now that we switch the pan left to the pan right, this output is just skipping the pan altogether and not doing a very good transition at all. So now let's see how WAN 2.2 does with the same thing. So I'm going to paste the original prompt in here with the pan left. Let's make sure we use the same parameters. Here we go. So let's see what our first output is. So this is for panning left. And you can see just like WAN 2.1, it has adhered to the prompt really well and the output is quite good. Now let's see what we get for panning right. And here we have our pan right view. And okay, while the output is not amazing, you can see that the camera movement is actually really great, and it has adhered to it far better than WAN 2.1, which basically just skipped that camera movement. Next up, we have a pullback. So pullback is when the scene starts really focused in on a particular object or character, and then the camera pulls out to reveal more of the environment. So in this case, we're starting with a close-up shot of a face of a samurai, and then the camera will pull back to reveal him standing in a battlefield. So let's see how WAN 2.1 does with this prompt. And while we're doing this, I'm also going to queue this up with 2.2 because it is a little bit slower. Interesting. So I have ran these prompts before, so I kind of know how the models generally behave. This is probably one of the worst results for this prompt. So while we're waiting for 2.2 to finish its execution, maybe we can give 2.1 another shot because it usually does much better than this. But it is adhering to the camera motion overall. So even though the output is not great and is a little too fast, it is doing what it's supposed to do for the camera motion. I have found that with this kind of situation, it may be the case that we are using too short of a clip. We can try that one next. Sometimes if your prompt has too much details and there's not enough time in the length of the latent video that you're giving to the model, it will just do really sudden and bad motions to try to fit it all in. There we go. It seems to have done a much better job here. But I think this will do a lot better if we increase this a little bit. Let's see. If we give it a little bit more time to create the scene that we want. Nope, that did not help us at all. So that was a false assumption. But the camera motion is being respected. That's the important thing that we care about for the purpose of this video. The camera is in fact pulling out to reveal more of the scene, even though the scene is not great. So let's see how 2.2 is doing with this. Okay, so it's doing a great job. Now, if we want to create the opposite effect, we will rewrite this prompt in a different order. So the prompt usually starts with the opening shot of the scene and then describes a motion to get to the closing shot of the scene. So if we want to rewrite this, we might say something like samurai standing alone on a foggy battlefield, gripping his katana. Fallen warriors. And the opposite of pulling out would be pushing in. I will move the wind element to the opening shot. I'll go back to 65 frames there, and let's see how 2.1 does, and let's queue it up also for 2.2. So again, overall quality, not great. Respecting the camera movement, yes, it's doing a good job of that. So let's try another iteration to give 2.1 a chance to get a bit of a better scene while 2.2 is working. There is some speculation that the integration of Wan2.2 into ComfyUI is somewhat buggy because it is taking an obscene amount of time. I'm running these on an H100, and a 5-second clip is taking about 10 minutes to generate, which should not be the case. It is 480p. It is 65 frames, and you can see that that 2.1 is running much faster than that. But I am also using the 14 billion parameter model, so that might have something to do with it. But I still feel like the performance of 2.2 is very poor at the moment. But the quality is amazing, so maybe it's worth the wait. So let's see what 2.1 produced for us again. And yeah, you can see that it's quite successful with camera push-in. And I imagine we are testing these exclusively with text to image, so maybe if you have a better starting image, then the output will be superior to this as well. Okay, we finally have our result for camera push in. So opening scene, very good. We have our wide view of the battlefield. yeah, we have a very good push in into the character's face. This is incredible. Quality is still not amazing, I would say, but obviously far superior to 2.1 for this scene. Now, for the next effect, we have Dolly In and Out. So this is very similar to pulling out and pushing in. The difference is that when we use terms like pulling out and pushing in, that usually means that the camera can do that multiple ways, including just zooming in and out. When we talk about Dolly In and Out, we're exclusively talking about the camera physically moving closer to or away from the subject. So here I have a prompt. I was trying to create an opening shot for kind of Breaking Bad. So we are doing a promotional poster. There's Walter White sitting in a chair with the Breaking Bad characters behind him. He's going to be in a warehouse. We're describing the scene overall and what he's wearing. The camera is going to dolly in. We're going to see what we end up with. And while this is generating, we're going to see, I'm going to give the same prompt to 2.2. So the dolly in effect, it is a pretty consistently solid camera movement in Wan 2.1. Let's see what happens when we try to change it a little bit. So we have the exact same prompt. We simply changed camera dolly in to camera dollies out, and let's see what we get. So this is what we get for dolling out. And to be honest, this is probably one of the best results I've seen from dolling out with Wan 2.1, because it's basically the camera's not moving. And most of the time, if I did get any camera movement out of 2.1 for dolly out, it would have been dollying in. So it seemed pretty set on that. Let's see how 2.2 is getting along. You can see it's still running. I did queue up one for dolly in and one for dolly out, and it's still running the dolly in. Okay. So as expected, this is a really great scene. Camera dollies in exactly as it's supposed to, and that's exactly the effect we're looking for. So let's just wait and see what the dolly out gives us. Okay, we have our result for the dolly out. Definitely the text was not the forte on this output, but let's see how the movement is. And yeah, the movement is actually pretty great. That's exactly what we wanted with the dolly out. So this was definitely something that 2.1 could never give us. And it's working incredibly well on 2.2. Now, next up, we have camera tilt. Now, a lot of these techniques, at the end of the day, they kind of do the same job, where they focus the viewer on one thing, and then as the camera moves, there's more that's revealed. So in this case, with the tilt, with this prompt, we are looking at the feet of a man wearing mountaineering gear and being out in the field. And then the camera starts rotating along its kind of horizontal axis, so that it starts kind of moving up, and it starts looking up from the feet, and then revealing the scene that unfolds above the feet, I guess, and then out into the distance. Let's see how I'm going to cue this for 2.2, and then I'm going to go ahead on 2.1 and run the same thing. There you go. So this is consistent with what I've got for this prompt with the Wan 2.1. So it's not exactly a tilt effect. The camera here is kind of moving vertically up, which is somewhat giving the effect that we wanted to see. Let's run it again while we wait for 2.2. But it's not exactly the effect that we wanted. We wanted the camera to be pointing down and then kind of shift to look up. And here the camera is kind of moving vertically. And let's see how 2.2 does. And that is a much better result. you can see that from the opening shot, if we go to this point, you can see that the camera is looking from above the shoes down at the shoes. Whereas if we compare this here, the camera is at the same level as the feet and it's moving up. So it's having a much better adherence to the specific camera movement that we wanted in 2.2 versus 2.1. I'm going to skip tracking shots because I found that tracking shots generally work pretty well in 2.1, and of course they also work very well in 2.2. I did want to talk about crash zooms, which is one of the most fun camera movements that I've learned about in the process of experimenting with AI videos. It creates a really fun and comedic effect. So here we have again an opening shot where we're exposing a lot of the scene. So we're in a mid-century modern room. There's a man in a leather chair wearing a suit, and the chair is in the center of the screen. And then the camera rapidly zooms in on the man's face, and he lets out a slight smirk. So I'm going to cue this up for 2.2. Now let's see how 2.1 does with this. So this is actually one of the best results that I've seen with 2.1 and this prompt. However, I kind of feel like 2.1 just seems to have a kind of an internal clock that it cannot move away from. So is this kind of a rapid zoom? Yes. Is it a crash zoom? Mm, not exactly. It's still too slow to be a crash zoom. But honestly, this is far better than anything I have gotten before from this prompt. So kudos to 2.1, I guess. It does produce crash zooms or something resembling them sometimes. Let's see how 2.2 is doing. Okay, so our output from 2.2 is ready, and let's see how it does. So I'm going to cue this again to see what we get with a second output out of 2.1. So this prompt, this is actually, as I'm recording this, these outputs are the exact opposite of what I've usually gotten from 2.1 and 2.2. 2.1 is actually giving something really close to what we want. And 2.2 is, while the image quality is much better, it's not actually much of a crash zoom. It's actually even slower than what 2.1 produced. Yep, 2.1 seems to do an okay job of this, much more okay than what I had seen previously. So the second result is a bit better out of 2.2, but it is actually quite similar to what we got from the first result of 2.1. So now kudos to 2.1. That was I had not gotten results that good from it for this camera movement before, but clearly it can sometimes produce it. And the last camera movement that I want to show you guys is a camera roll. So here we're having an overhead shot. So basically the camera is above the subject. You can think as if it's kind of mounted on the ceiling looking down. It's an overhead shot of a man asleep on his desk in front of a computer. The room is dark except for the glow of the monitor, and the camera rolls in a full 360 motion. So this is kind of inspired by one of the key opening scenes in the movie The Matrix. Camera roll effect is meant to create a sense of disorientation or instability. And so let's see how these two models perform for it. So this is what we get out of 2.1. It's basically not adhering to the prompt at all. The the camera movement has gone back to being a zoom in or a push in of some sort. I have managed to get something resembling this camera roll effect from it before, so it might just depend on the seed. While we're waiting for 2.2, we can definitely run this again. Now, maybe one thing that I will try to give 2.1 a bit more of a fighting chance is increase this frame count and see if giving it more space to create the effect that we want makes a difference. So this is our third attempt at making this camera roll effect work. And I have gotten this to work before with 2.1 with the same prompt. So it is a bit random, depends on the seed, but yeah, just not great. Let's see what we get out of 2.2. And there we go. I think 2.2 could also probably use a bit more of space in the latent video, but this is a great result to start. It is also zooming out, which we did not ask for, but overall, really, really great. So that's it for the first video talking about camera movements with Wan2.2. We're looking forward to running more experiments with it. If you have ideas of what you would like to see, make sure to leave us a comment. We will have more videos on Wan2.2 soon, so be sure to like and subscribe.